All right, it is 6:30. Good evening, everyone. We'll go ahead and call this, if I hear myself a little bit, Planning Commission meeting to order tonight at 6:30. Kelly, if you could please do a roll call.
Yeah, and just to make a note that currently in December, the city council, sorry. In December, the city council decided to extend or grant Darren Wagner, our chair, another 4-year term. So he'll be with us thankfully for another 4 years. And then just to remind everybody on the call tonight, Commissioner Poulin decided not to be on the commission any longer. And so currently we are a 6-member commission. At some point in 2026, I'm sure we'll have a 7th member join us. But when we had the latest round of commissioner applications, Commissioner Wagner was our only applicant. So I think last time around we had 10 applicants for 3 positions. This time we had 1 applicant for 2 positions. So you never know. So I just wanted to let you know, kind of know what the status of that is. And when I call for the roll call here, we're only going to have 6 at least for the next few months.
So if we know somebody who might be interested, we should send them your way.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. And with that, Commissioner Crosby,
Here.
Commissioner Malone,
Here.
Commissioner Zawowski,
Here.
Commissioner O'Leary,
Present.
Commissioner Lee is excused.
Excused. Very
And
excused.
what's that?
Very excused.
Very excused.
Yes.
And Chair Wegener.
Here. All right, thank you very much, Kelly. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes, and I'll call for any edits, additions, deletions, anything that we saw that needed to be changed. I saw nothing.
I move to approve the minutes as listed and written.
I'll second. All right, we have a motion to approve the minutes. A second, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Minutes approved. And this is where we move to requests from the floor. So the commission welcomes any comment at this time. If you're participating online, go ahead and raise your hand or dial *9. And I think everybody in the room is here to talk about something else. Double check. Don't have anybody. So with that, we'll move on to the awkward part of the night for me, which is where somebody votes me out.
We got the director's report.
Oh, director's report.
Yeah.
Never mind. I'll stay for a little bit longer.
We're gonna delay your agony.
And it doesn't take effect till the next meeting.
That's true.
anyway.
So
you're
for the
chair night.
for the director's report tonight, the only thing I really had was to refer everybody to the update that I provide the city council, and then I provide the planning commission with a link to that when we launch it. So I think I sent that last week, I believe. It's mainly the development services staff members besides myself that write the majority of that report, and then I just do a little tweaking, and I'll usually add like 1 paragraph to it. So thank you to all the staff and development services that puts that together every month. Other than that, I didn't have anything else to update everybody on unless they had any questions they wanted to ask me.
I was just curious if there was a quick recap of just development activity from last year. I know it probably wasn't locked in the moratorium, but just I'm curious if you had any quick stats yet.
We have not put that together yet. We actually usually put that together with the goal setting session every other year in February or whenever the city manager asks for it. So I haven't actually put that together, but as soon as we put that together, I'd be more than happy to share it with the commission. What I can say is anecdotally, like, as you all know, we're like way down on both land use application. Well, actually, let me take that back. We're not actually way down on land use applications. We're way down on larger, meaningful land use applications. We're still processing a lot of smaller things, which is nice. Keeps people busy. And we're still getting actually a lot of pre-app requests and inquiries actually from the public.
They want to get in line for those.
They do, or there's a lot of people that still don't know about the moratorium. So even though it's been 3.5 years, there's still a lot of people that don't understand what it is or that it exists. So I think actually Patrick might have handled 2 different requests today around it alone. So we are getting a lot of inquiries and a lot of questions still, and we are still getting some building permits. although that slowed down in the second half of 2025, I think in large part due to interest rates still being high and uncertainty with the national economy or the global economy. And then I think part of that also was probably to do with an ongoing lawsuit with the Home Builders Association or Home Builders of Sandy, a little group that was formed, and they've been asking for lower SDC rates. And I know the city council's been hard at work trying to accommodate that while still trying to have our SDCs be impactful and to offset utility rates and not harm customers. So the city council's been meeting a lot, I know, trying to figure that out and try to come to a resolution that works for both parties. And I believe in the next few months, we'll see some sort of resolution around that. And with that, that will probably help building permits start to jump again, and more things go out there. So, but you know, I do want to just on the record to be known that the SDCs is just one very small portion of the overall costs associated with home construction. And by no means is that the only thing that has decreased the amount of home construction seen in Sandy last year. So we had been kind of seeing it coming for a while.
What's been the response to the alternative sewer things for?
Very good question, Commissioner. We had a lot of interest in it. I think I had two developers mainly that were really interested in it. And then a third developer that was also somewhat interested. And now that we've adopted it, I have zero interest at this moment. Of course, that's how it always works, right? So I think in the future, we'll probably see interest in it. It's kind of odd that at least one of them hasn't moved forward with it, in all honesty. I think it made a lot of sense for their development.
I think it's because of those other factors you.
It is. That
Yes,
is
the uncertainty is.
Correct.
Running high right now
correct.
everywhere.
So yeah, it is interesting that nobody has actually applied for one yet. I think, in all honesty, I think a good policy would be, and ultimately this will be the city council's decision, but I think a good policy for every city now that we've instituted alternative, I think we should keep it in the code permanently. Because there's always going to be cases where it makes sense over a traditional connection. And so I think moving forward, my advice is going to be to let it remain in the code.
Because essentially it's at council discretion anyways, right?
Correct. And the old process that we had in the code, a few of you will remember, is actually more unknown. It's a traditional variance process that goes before the commission. The city council actually doesn't have any say in it because the decision's made at the commission unless an applicant was up to appeal it. As you'll recall, we did that with the Space Age gas station, probably 7 or 8 years ago. So my recommendation moving forward would be to keep this process in the code, which I think is a more streamlined process that includes the council in the decision-making process. So that'd be my recommendation.
We were at a campground over Eastern Oregon a couple of weeks ago, and I took a picture of it in the campground. They had one of those boys and girls bathroom on a trailer, beautifully cedar sided, ready to go.
Sandy style.
Pretty close, pretty close. Didn't have stone at the bottom.
Sorry, I had to throw that in there.
No, I just thought that's what we're talking about.
In your director's report, you mentioned that Bornston Views and Sandy Woods were finishing up with public improvements. Are we anticipating that they're gonna continue right on and build houses, or do we anticipate that they might sit for a little bit?
I mean, I think, as I said in the director's report, I think that they'll both get platted in the next few weeks, if not by sometime in February. The main thing they were both waiting on was the streetlights. And I know that the Bornston Views got them all in, I think, last week. And
Last
Sandy
week.
Woods got like the pedestal connections in, so they're like one step behind. It's an interesting question. I don't know if they'll move forward in getting building permits over the next few months so that they can construct in the spring and summer. I would anticipate at least some of the lots. Because as you know, when they construct the subdivision, they've already outlaid several $1 million
Right.
each. But yeah, I don't know an exact timeline.
All I know is every time I drive by, I wonder how they got their grass to grow so fast in the middle of winter. And I can't get mine to grow at all at any time of year.
We should talk with people at Dearborn.
Yeah. All right, any other questions for Kelly? All right, we'll move on to our council liaison report.
I do not have a whole lot tonight. Just to recap, Winterfest, our approximate numbers at the conclusion of Winterfest, we had about 35,000 people visit Minot Park for Winterfest,
Wow.
using our transit system, using our restaurants, visiting other parts of the city. So that's a huge number and a lot of work goes into that. So it was really nice to see that many people come and appreciate it because it's a lot of work.
I couldn't believe how many people there were at the tree lighting.
I think there were close to 1,000
Yeah.
at the tree lighting was what we
It was-
anticipated.
Huge.
Yeah. Yeah, and even after the big rainstorm, we had the shortest day walkway in the park. That was 2 days after we had all the rain and the parking lot had flooded but dissipated. And the park held up remarkably well. There was no problems with mud or anything like that. And the creek that runs through was very full, but it made such a nice noise in the background for all of the departments. And it was really well traveled that night as well, even though it was cold and we had had a whole lot of rain. So people really like Winterfest and a lot of work goes into it. It's a really great event for the whole city.
Actually, I was amazed at how many people were there in the park for the Santa night one. That one I was in the park and it was like you could barely walk through the park and I was like, I've never seen it like this outside of Sandy Mountain Festival. So it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, we're pretty proud of it. We should all be.
Should be.
All right, anything else from anybody else for commission discussion? All right,
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
I was just gonna bring up one quick thing for you guys to talk about amongst you. Commissioner Malone brought up before the meeting that she was gonna be out of town for a little bit in February. Was there any desire to meet in February? If not, the next meeting was probably gonna be in March. I just wanted to let you guys know that.
I don't have a compelling desire.
yeah, I don't have anything off the top of my head. Yeah, because it doesn't sound like we'll have a new 7th commissioner by then. And that would be the only thing I could think of that we might, our yearly or bi-yearly trading.
Hopefully we'll have one by March.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to bring it up while we're all here talking.
All right, so planning commission chair appointments. Did you want to do the staff report on that or did we just?
I read it up. It's the same thing pretty much every year now.
All right.
I did put a few notes about who's served consecutive years and everything per your section of Title II that you guys refer to. So I did add some notes about that in here for you guys to consider.
The Cliff Notes version is, it can't be me again because I've been here for 2 years.
I was vice chair once, but that was 20 years ago.
Well, I would,
You're eligible again, I would say.
I'll jump the gun and get things moving and I
Actually,
would
more like
nominate
25.
Linda Malone to be the chair.
All right, we have any other nominations or recommendations or nominations for vice chair? I'll take them both.
Since since Commissioner Crosby's only served 1 year as vice chair, I would nominate him to be vice chair for another year. Please.
Any others? Looking at those online as well.
Brandon, you're next.
I
I think those are good suggestions. Linda, president, and Jerry, vice president. That sounds good.
Right, at some point I'll need somebody to turn that into a motion.
I'll do mine into a motion.
And I have prepared a motion, just so you know, in the staff report, in case you want to use that.
Oh, okay, there you go. Do you see it?
I do not, because I don't.
Okay, I will go ahead
My
and
computer.
move it. I move to appoint Commissioner Malone as chair and Commissioner Crosby as vice chair of the Sandy Planning Commission for the calendar year 2026.
And second that.
All right, we have a motion for Commissioner Crosby and a second from Commissioner Malone. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye, all opposed? Motion passes. Congratulations to you both. All right, you can take over tomorrow though,
In March.
or next time, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to our new business. Semi judicial here, so I'm gonna go ahead and open this public hearing for this, yeah? Yep.
Yeah, it's a quasi judicial public hearing.
Perfect.
Sorry, I didn't get you the.
No, it's all right. It just didn't specifically say on there, so I just wanted to double check. And we'll go ahead and open file 25051 major modification request for Deer Point Park at 6:45. At this time, we're going to call for any abstentions from the hearing body. Hearing none, we'll move on to conflicts of interest. And then
I'm not sure if it's a conflict of interest, but I do live directly across the street from the park. I don't consider it a conflict of interest, but if anybody else does, I'm happy to bow out.
Glad to have you there.
All right, I think that might even fall into our next category, which is ex parte contact.
Yes, since I had never been to the site except seeing it as I drove by, I drove over there today and walked around, took some pictures, made some observations, and just wanted to be well prepared for any discussion tonight, but I didn't, other than talking to a dad playing with his daughter on the playground, I didn't really talk with any construction workers or people involved in the site.
I haven't been to the site, but I have received some updates outside of here just from listening to public meetings, parks, advisory board, city council, and whatnot. The others. All right, and so I will call for any challenges to the hearing body. See, no, we will move on. All right. So if you wish to testify tonight, you must raise all issues you wish to address at this hearing. If your issue is not raised at this hearing, you may not be able to raise it at a later in any appeal. Your comment should state why the application should or should not be approved or include your proposed modifications you believe are necessary for approval according to the standards. If you do not raise specific issues at the final evidentiary hearing, or by close of the record, or fail to provide statements or evidence to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal the decision to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that particular issue. Any party may request that the hearing be continued to a later date or that the record remain open after the hearing is closed. All right, failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Staff report, please.
All right, good evening, everybody. I'm going to start with the presentation. Then it from the beginning. Yeah,
Yes.
the full.
Yep.
Full thing. Let's see if I can move it through there. All right, so hopefully you all read through the staff report, gave you a lot more detail. This is just going to kind of skim over some of the major points. So this major modification request is to revise the planning commission's decision on two specific issues. The first issue is the applicant is requesting to remove the condition to paint the shelter I-beam gable ends with the false wood pattern technique that was discussed and shown to you at the last meeting. The second issue is the applicant is requesting to omit the requirement to install any cupolas or secondary roof features entirely. For the planning commission to remove this requirement entirely, we've done this under the major modification, but it will require review and approval of variance because you would be removing the actual requirement. It just couldn't be modified. Both requests are a major modification to the planning commission's final order under file number 25037 design review variance. So this is a reminder of using some of the same slides I used on the first presentation. this is where the idea for the false wood pattern was, kind of came from, just by using it multiple times through the year. But the premise to apply, this fake wood grain pattern with the paint was to provide another design element required for Sandy style architectural characteristics. Primarily, it was brought up by the planning division, as an additional design element, because, at that time, we were asking for the two variances to eliminate, design elements, such as the stone around the bases and the color, of that. So, this is major modification is to remove that condition, completely. So it's to take it off. That's one decision that needs to be made tonight. So just to kind of go back to the city's recommendation, on that, again, was because we were eliminating certain design elements, but it was to emulate that space age gas station finish, because at the time of the meeting, we weren't informed that there were going to be, that the steel beams that were going to be used were going to be I-beams. So we didn't really know. So it seemed like a good idea at the time. Even at the first PC meeting, I don't think that even the design firm could confirm that, what they were using, or at least I don't think it was 100%. So, but as far as I mentioned in the staff report, the structure still does require, under chapter 17.90 design standards, that, any building elevation, and we were considering this a building or a structure that faces a right of way, shall incorporate at least 3 design elements. And in the staff report, I listed them all out. But here, just to go over the 3 that, we pulled out that meet this requirement. And they're on the screen: the exposed natural wood, colored beams, posts, and brackets. There's also the heavy metal brackets is a design element of cast iron. It's all steel, it's all cast iron, which may be structural brackets applied as a cosmetic detailing. This is may, but in this case, I assume that they're structural. And then the third one is the house style trusses on both ends. That is typically what we've been seeing, over and over for Sandy style for these, structural, gable ends. But also I put it as an addition, the forest green metal roof, which everybody can see because the structure is built, is also observed as a design element. So we're above that 3, the required 3. So putting that recommendation to have the false fake wood pattern on there isn't necessary if you choose to remove that condition, in this major modification. The next thing is the, adjustments and variances, which, Sandy, you guys are lucky you get to have a type 3 special variance, which is very wide open, to how you can interpret, granting a variance. In this case, there's the 3 sections, but what we used before in the previous, case file number, and this one is the unique nature of the proposed development, and such that the intent of the purpose of the regulations and the provisions to be waived will not be violated. And the second part, to consider, take into consideration, is authorization of the special variance will not be material detrimental to the public welfare and will not be injurious to other properties in the area, when compared to the effects of the development. So those are the items that are primarily what you're looking at. And I gave you, I think, over a page of findings in the staff report for you guys to look at and kind of consider. One thing to point out, and I'm not sure if this is the exact right time, but part of actually requiring some of the design elements, and I think it's been mentioned a little bit, is that we don't have design standards specific to parks and open space. So we're kind of interpret part of what we've seen in the code, and used or process under other uses under commercial conditions. So we don't really have the design standards specifically for parks that you would see, these are exactly, it's cut and dry of what you should have. And here's where you can deviate from it, or here's the list of what you can, build or apply to a structure. So it's a little bit out of place for when you're applying commercial standards to something that's typically in a park, or in this case, a city or a local park. The secondary roof form requirement that we're looking at here, I just want to go into this, just back up some details again. The shelter is an open air structure, 100 feet long. Code requires 4 secondary roof forms for a structure that long. The planning commission decided that the cupolas were the secondary roof form that they prefer. I think we brought up a couple other ones, but I can't remember what they were. I think we put the cupolas at the top of the list, and you also preferred that, but you couldn't agree on the number. Or at least that's what was in one of the conditions that was in the final order. The planning commission conditioned that the applicant consult with the project architect and submit some details on the appropriate quantity and size of the cupola that were to be installed. And we did that. We did some back and forth on that. The project architects evaluated multiple options for integrating the cupolas into the structure, and after careful review, the design team and the applicant concluded that the cupola should not be included in the final construction of the basketball court shelter. So that was done. That was basically on you. You wanted that additional review or consulting or discussion. Again, that's the opinion of the applicant and as well as the planning commission. But the planning commission, I looked online on multiple occasions, and many different types of cupolas, and they all look either the same or similar. There was no variation. So the cupolas are kind of the design that we all recognize. I didn't actually put any in here because I didn't want to premise any this show you. So these are typically what we came up with after looking online in a prior planning commission meeting and presentation, and this one. These are typically what came up. Very low pitched roof, open air design, no secondary roof features or vents. Pretty much what you're seeing there. I didn't see any variation from this. But what we did see is cupola. Every picture when you brought up a cupola was in a traditional agricultural situation, primarily intended to provide either lighting or ventilation for barn structures, or have limited openings and require such features for functional purposes. This would be primarily aesthetic. The planning division, the applicant, which is Parks and Rec, and the consulting architect all agree that because the proposed basketball shelter at Deer Point Park is an open air structure and already provides ample light and airflow, that rendering an addition of the cupolas is unnecessary for both functional and aesthetic. And it just comes to our recommendation and motion. I provided all of you both the recommendation and motion. It's a little different than what's in the staff report. Just a little bit worded differently. I think it's more appropriate to what's before you. But the one point, as you can see at the bottom there, that I didn't mention in the staff report is if you choose to deny the request, the motion can just state that you deny one or both. In this particular case, you wouldn't have to do alternate findings. Like in typical cases where if the findings met the requirements for for what was required by the code, and you decided to go in a different way, you'd have to come up with your own findings. But in this case, you've already made a decision. Now this is your major you're modifying the condition on both the fake wood stain pattern and the variance. You can
So denying it just keeps the previous approvals in place.
exactly. Yeah.
Is there room for additional conditions or to change the condition?
Absolutely.
Or is it just whatever?
Nope, you can absolutely put more conditions on this.
One thing I want to bring up is anything on like process, so that kind of question or anything on process, that's the main reason I have our city attorney on the line tonight. Because at the end of the meeting, depending on what the planning commission decides, if they go with the staff recommendation that Patrick has outlined, or if they go with a different decision, then the applicant, which is Parks and Rec, and the city manager will need to decide their next steps, if they're going to go with that, or if they're going to appeal it to the city council or whatnot. So in preparation of understanding exactly what those options are, and also what you could all render as a group, we definitely wanted the city attorney online. So Josh is available if there's any questions. I don't think he's going to speak unless
Spoken to.
I wasn't gonna say that, I guess. And then the only other thing I was going to request, and ultimately you can go with this or you don't have to, it's your meeting, it's not mine. But one thing I would like to do is slightly different than we did back in July. I believe that's when we met. Is if we could wait to close the public hearing until you're ready to render a decision. That way we could ask the applicant, the three people before you here, any specific questions and follow up, and give them kind of a last bite of the apple, so to speak, before you render the decision. So.
And before we get to them, can you just speak a little bit more to, I think it's been a while since we've done a major modification request. Just kind of the process, because I believe I was reading in there that it is kind of like starting over in a way. Or kind of what are we, just kind of maybe the scope of what we're looking at today as part of this request?
Yeah, so you're doing a modification. The modification request is basically to several findings and a few conditions within your previous approval that you granted back in July. But yeah, you are basically starting over in the sense that new evidence can be submitted. New testimony can occur. It's the de novo. It's not on the record, which I've never done one of those in my 20 years doing this. The on the record process that would typically be like during an appeal process. But so yeah, it's new evidence can be submitted into the record. It has a new land use file. I think if you did want to impose additional conditions, as was brought up, that would be something I would talk to the attorney about first prior to doing any of that. But yeah, It's pretty open.
There's no criteria.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I believe first up we have applicant's presentation. Welcome.
Thank you, planning commission members and staff for having us this evening. This is always a awkward like role reversal, so I'll be brief. I think city staff did a good job of highlighting the reason behind this major modification request this evening. I think the first thing I'll say is when we brought this before the commission back in July, you had some renderings on a piece of paper, but you didn't have an actual structure to look at, and that structure is being built. The park is nearly completed, and so I think being able to visually see how it fits on the site and is visible from the highway, and really the amazing work that we've done to build that structure in a way that sort of fits and blends in with the natural landscape of that area really well. Maybe would have addressed some of the questions around the need for a cupola or secondary roof structure right off the bat. Of course, can't build it and then have a conversation around whether or not to put the secondary roof structure on. We needed to have that application process go, in the way that it did. So I guess my point with that being that I think it's easier to understand sort of how the structure fits on that site, and at least from our standpoint, removes the question of whether or not a secondary roof structure really needed to be involved to make it aesthetically pleasing. The second point that I'll make is there was quite a bit of discussion, as I recall, at that July 28th meeting around not painting any I-beams with a faux wood finish. And staff mentioned that at the time they didn't know or we weren't aware of what types of beams were going to be used. Ultimately, I-beams were used, and so the final order is written in such a way that required those beams to be painted with the faux wood finish. But the sentiment that I picked up with the planning commission at that time was if it was an I-beam, that probably would look funny, for lack of a better term. And so there's just some confusion around, should it be painted with a faux wood finish or should it not, because the material is an I-beam. So we have these two requests in front of you this evening. We're hopeful that we can reach an agreement and kind of put a bow on this capital project and do the grand opening and get the park completed. We certainly understand the intent of the commission to try to make sure that the applicant is treated as any other applicant, would be. But we do believe that the cupolas don't add a functional or aesthetic benefit at this point to that project, and that the end result is a pretty stellar looking covered play area. I would argue much more aesthetically pleasing than some of the examples that were in the PowerPoint from other communities that are, pretty bare bones, ugly sheet metal colored that don't really blend in with their surrounding environment.
The beams are a pretty yellow color. It's not, raw metal, they're painted yellow.
And tried to make sure that structure, was as aesthetically pleasing and blended in with the neighborhood and the surrounding environment as much as possible. And of course, we have our Parks and Recreation Director and our consultant landscape architect here to answer any questions or provide any other information that I have not provided to you in my brief statement. Thank you.
All right. Oh, let's move on to public testimony here. I'll read some things here for good measure. For those who wish to speak, please try to avoid repetition. If somebody else has already expressed the same thoughts, it's sufficient to state that you agree with the statements of a previous speaker, even if that's all you say. If you have documents, maps, or letters that you wish to have considered by the hearing body, they must formally be placed into the record of this proceeding. To do that, either before or after you speak, email your materials to planning@city.or.us, and staff will make sure the evidence is properly processed. As a reminder, testimony for this public hearing is going to be called for in one group, whether you are in favor, against, or neutral. And so with that, we will go ahead and call for any testimony. Raise your hand or dial *9 online. Speak up if you're here. Awesome. Staff recap and a recommendation, please.
Just that agree with what was just said by the city manager, as far as believe that it the structure actually kind of stands out for itself. It's an aesthetic. Its function is, it's not going to be changed by adding any type of secondary roof feature to it. And we recommend both the condition for the fake wood stain can be removed, and that the variance be granted.
Great. And would the applicant like any rebuttal of staff agreeing with you?
Not at this time.
Alright.
Thank you.
With that, let's go ahead. We're going to keep the public hearing open. So we're going to move into discussion. Anybody want to start us off?
I'd like to start us off.
Yeah, go right ahead.
So a few things on the faux paint. I was at the meeting where we discussed this. First off, full disclosure, I live right across the street from the park. And in fact, I'm at the opposite end of the park, which is on a hill. And my house, where I look out my back deck or side windows, is actually higher than this roof. So I see the roof, and I want to make sure everybody is aware of that. The discussion on the faux paint, my recollection, and I could be wrong, was that we determined at that meeting that it wasn't necessary, which is different than what I heard here. It's interesting to hear that we decided to do it at that meeting, and my recollection is different than that. So I'm questioning that as a needed variance. And maybe I'm wrong. I'm an old man, so that's possible. As far as the roof structure and the cupolas, the discussion began by talking about a requirement for dormers. The specific word used was dormers. And I suggested cupolas as a secondary roof structure. We discussed that and agreed that that was a suitable secondary roof structure. Somehow over time, it has turned into the cupolas being functional or allowing light or ventilation, which of course there's no ventilation needed, and surely the light would just be a moving little bright spot that wouldn't benefit anyone either. So I'd like us to be discussing the realities of how this came to be. And then when I see pictures in other places of covered play areas, whether they're basketball or whatever, and the fact that they don't have secondary roof structures, I'm going to guess those people don't have a Sandy style code requirement or whatever you would call it. So I don't really view that as that helpful to this. And then the last thing I would say is I'm questioning how this is even part of Sandy style construction. And I think I'm going to urge caution to this commission that if we just approve these as variances, which I'll be fine with, that we leave ourselves open to future developments where they say, hey, over at that park, the city did this and this because it was, them or their money or however it would be viewed. I want to be kind of careful how this decision comes out and or take a look at what Sandy style really means. Again, I live across from the park, and I question the efficacy of applying those standards to this park. And that has come up over time in discussion a few times that it's a little bit questionable. And to be honest, sometimes you get too defined with things, and then that causes problems. But I'm suggesting that part of the decision is that these design elements aren't necessary, and somehow mention that Sandy style doesn't apply in this situation, whether based on geography or based on the fact that it's a park. Like, there needs to be leeway on where to do what. And having said all of that, I'm in full support of not doing the faux paint and not putting the cupolas on, specifically that this is a great benefit to our neighborhood. It's beautiful. I see kids out there every day. I don't think the basketball courts are completely done and used, but for what it is, it's perfect. And then the last thing is a side, maybe this is more as being a neighbor. I'm curious if the place has got temporary occupancy permits to where it's safe for kids and people to be out there. Or if that even applies on something like a city park, and that's all I've got.
Thank you. Maybe, I do think that the staff report was accurate in at least my recollection of how we got to the faux wood beam portion, which is we had originally started talking about it for the vertical poles. We knew that those were I-beams, and we did think that they were funny looking, but we thought that the gable ends were going to be more of a square metal tubing, and so we thought that they would look good at that point.
You're correct. I apologize.
Yeah, and so that's just kind of the evolution of kind of where we got to that with that. My question though around that is, how did we end up on conditioning that anyways if all of the Sandy style elements were typically already met? Do you remember why that was a condition to begin with? Is there an element of the code that I'm missing there that made us require that?
I mean, the Sandy style, let's not make any like, so one thing that Commissioner Leary did say that I want to remind everybody is, so somebody could point back to this decision and say that, and make the claim that the city's treating themselves differently than developers. I don't think that would have much weight because I don't know if there's many developers out there building a basketball court structure in a park. So it's not a like for like. It really isn't. So I wouldn't be that concerned about somebody using it as an example later on. At least I'm not.
Well, and the other aspects in the park, the covered picnic area meets all Sandy styles. It's got the
Right.
brick, it's got the rock around the bases, it's got the wooden beams inside. I mean, it follows everything. And you're right, a huge basketball court like that
Well,
is a one-off.
So the
I'll bring it up later.
Yeah.
So the other part I was gonna say is, so that's part of it. The other part that I was going to mention is that typically it would be wood, it wouldn't be steel. And so in a more recent example where somebody didn't propose wood, they proposed steel, was the Space Age gas station. And there we said, because you're not doing steel, since you're not doing wood, you're doing steel, we would like you to mimic wood. And they came up with that grain look with the paint. And I think it turned out really well. In that case, that's tube steel. This is I-beam, which we talked about in July. That's kind of how it came about.
Right, but was there anything for us to require them to do that to meet a requirement in the code, or did we just require it just for fun?
No, I think because staff was recommending approval of 3 variances, we thought that.
It was kind of to help with the other variances.
Correct.
Okay.
Offset. It was basically an offset.
It was an offset for something
Yeah,
else.
you
Okay.
have the secondary roof forms for the roof, specifically that section design elements. You have the building materials, which is a lot of what we're talking about here as far as the gable ends and stuff. And then there's the building elevation. So there's the building materials, but there's also the building elevations, and that's where you get that 30-inch high stone base. So yeah, it was kind of just an offset and it wasn't putting a lot of burden back onto the Parks Department for additional cost. It was just something that was like, oh wow, you have these large exposed columns and exposed gable ends that we knew were steel, but again, it was like, the epiphany when you're standing there filling your gas tank up at Space Age, you're like, wow, this isn't a bad, this wouldn't look bad.
It's an attractive
And
alternative.
and it wouldn't cost that much. So yeah, it was more of just an offset as they were asking for variances and thought that would help in the
Help balance
conversation.
things out.
Yep.
And that's typical. We usually recommend some sort of offset depending on the number of variances.
Sorry, does anybody else want to
I just, a couple, question of the applicant first, I guess. On the slide that we were showing, said that you'd looked at all options and concluded that it should not be required. Would somebody be honest enough to tell us why?
Yeah, I'm not an architect, so I'm gonna invite Brian Martin.
I
up
mean,
here
I'm
to-
assuming it can be done. Yeah, the cupolas, yeah.
I would be, I would love an answer, but also non-specific to cupolas as well,
Yeah, come up for the mic, sir, please.
if you're answering already.
After we
Ryan, can
bet,
you, for the record, 'cause we
yeah.
gotta put it in the minutes, can you introduce who you are?
Brian Martin, Lango Hansen Landscape Architects, do you want an address?
Street.
We
address.
don't need it because well, you can give it if you want.
1100 Northwest Gleason Street, Portland, Oregon. So following the July meeting, I took a road trip to the in-laws back in Idaho and was going through rural eastern Washington, looking at lots of barns, and they all have the same steep roof pitch, and obviously they'll have walls. Many of them have the cupolas, and so there's this very specific vernacular associated with the cupola. So then coming back and looking at our shelter with the much shallower roof pitch, no walls, just these steel columns. Kind of, I think what Patrick was speaking to is we didn't find any precedent for an open air structure that had these cupolas in a meaningful way, as well as with the roof pitch. So it felt like a new, not an invention, but a different architectural style, kind of combining different parts and pieces.
Okay. That's fine. I'm just curious. The other thing that has been mentioned, and I think it's a critical thing to get into the findings on this decision, is what Patrick said and what Kelly alluded to, is that there are no specific standards for parks. And I think that's the one thing that sets up somebody saying, yes, but you didn't allow it here on this kind of thing. In some respects, if I'm reading right on that there aren't specific things, we didn't have to anyway.
But you did have to follow 1790, 120.
Is that the Sandy style?
Yeah, it does say that in chapter 1786, which is the Parks and Open
Oh,
Space
okay.
section.
But you were saying that there aren't specific design standards for parks.
No, we're applying what's typically applied to commercial development to park structures and parks and open space.
Because we don't have specific design standards for parks. Is that-
Not yet.
Not yet. Well, that's.
We're working on it.
Well,
So that's part of the finding in my thinking, is because there weren't there. That lessens the compellingness, if that's creating a new word, for requiring some of these things. That, but my recollection on the faux paint was, we thought if it was I-beams, it wouldn't make sense.
Right.
And it
That
was.
would be silly. So I have no problems with that one. And on the cupolas, it's good hearing what's all been said. I think though that there is an aesthetic benefit to a cupola just because it's different. There's something there. It's not a flat, boring roof. You can't say there's no aesthetic element to it. I mean, there's aesthetic element to putting Christmas lights in a house, like it or not. But anyway,
not to disagree, but having been to the site today, putting a cupola on that huge, not flat roof, but it's got a pitch to it. It looks fine. It works perfectly for the thing it's intended to, which is a huge outdoor basketball court / play structure. If you were to stick some little cupolas on either side, I'm not saying it's like putting lipstick on a pig, but it's not a pig, it's a beautiful roof. But putting cupolas on it is a waste of aesthetics.
it would look silly.
It would look silly.
No, I agree.
It would look really silly. The silliest thing for me when I went out there was that this is gonna be 2 backstops. I mean, that thing is huge. Are we talking 2 half-court games going on? Because you're not gonna have a game going the whole length of that thing. And when they paint, are they gonna paint the floor and put the 3-point line in and all that stuff? I mean, Tupper Park has 4 hoops. It's not as long as that building. At least it doesn't feel as long as that building. And it's got 2 half-court hoops and the end hoops. Real usable. If you're gonna do one big long court, it'd be better to put the second, measure what a legal size basketball court is and put the second hoop somewhere in the middle under the roof. And one at the other, and then have an open play area where maybe you would paint in hopscotch, put a tetherball court or something to where it can be multi-use. If you have just a court at either end and you get,
Alexa, how long is,
100 feet. Is it 100
It was
feet?
designed for professional court.
how long is a basketball court?
It's huge. And
Yeah, but it's a full court.
it's a full court,
A
but
standard NBA basketball court is 94 feet long and 50 feet wide.
yeah. Well, it's that big. It looks bigger when you go out there. It just looks like compared to the other places because it's not gonna be, we're not having professionals come in there and play basketball. It's gonna be the youth sports teams come in there and use it when it's really raining, they wanna practice.
So
Um,
just so everybody knows, a high school basketball court is the same size as an NBA basketball court. It's just like football, the
Yeah.
field dimensions are the same.
And whether or not it gets used that way is,
But it will
Doesn't
get
matter to
painted,
us.
correct? You will have the court and
Yeah,
the
yes.
keys and all that painted
Waiting
out
for
there.
the appropriate
But
weather
yeah,
to
I
allow
think
that.
putting cupolas on it doesn't make sense and faux painting the beams, they're nice, pretty yellow color now. It's gonna serve the purpose for what it was built for. A place out of the rain for people to shoot baskets or dribble or whatever. I had a suggestion to put a pickle court in one end, but I thought, no, it's gonna be used for what was built for. And I don't have, but I do think, Kelly, you need to have some work for you to add to the code this is a one-off. We're not gonna have dozens of these popping up all over town. This is a one-off. But we need to have something within the code, within 179 to one whatever, that says structures that are of unique use where there's an out that doesn't require a variance for one-of-a-kind structures.
There'll be a new section proposed by staff in 2026 for park structures that don't have that are not enclosed. So if the city does build a new community center eventually or something like that, that would be full blown Sandy style.
Right.
But there would be a slightly different code written for these open air structures.
Like I say, the picnic area that's over there is beautiful. It's got nice real wood ceiling. It's got the wraparound. It's got wooden beams. It's got the cast iron rivets and all that. I mean, it's total Sandy style. And the park itself it's laid out really, really nicely.
Commissioner O'Leary, I do see your hand raised. I just wanted to add while it's relevant. I don't necessarily see this building as a one-off. 2 years ago, when I did principal for a day at Sandy Grade, the principal mentioned that they were planning and trying to raise money very, very slowly for a structure exactly like this for their playground. So they had
On
outdoor,
a school site, that'd be great.
where they had outside, covered area for the days that it's raining. So this would be
They used to have
exactly.
one.
Yeah, this would be exactly like that.
Yeah.
So it's not a one-off. I also see these type of thing in industrial areas where it's essentially a metal roof that they have equipment and cars or trucks or whatever
They're
under.
not in the park system.
Right. My point being is that it's not a one-off type of building. It's not, I don't think, just because we haven't had any, doesn't mean that we won't have any. And that we need to move forward. I have a couple other thoughts, but I'll let Commissioner O'Leary go.
Yeah, two things. The discussion about the roof and why we were even talking about it at that meeting when there were already 3 elements determined or something like that. The discussion revolved around the fact that this roof is so big and that we were concerned that it would need to be broken up. And that Sandy style the specific word used was dormers, and I've read the code, but it's pretty lengthy. And I'm not sure that it says dormers in there or not, but so that's why this even came up, and now it's there, and so we can see it. The other thing I want to just address as a point of clarification is that when the architect drives through the farmlands of Idaho and looks at cupolas and there's something like all the same, that could just be driven by the local TSC had a sale on them or something like that. My career was in construction management. On commercial buildings, I have managed the installation of many cupolas, and they are typically field built on site. So when people say a little cupola would look funny up there or the roof pitch is different, that's why we referred it back to the architects to look at it. The original concept would be that it's architecturally pleasing. And there is some merit in looking at that big, long, straight roof and saying that a cupola would be a design element, but it would need to be specific to the structure, not take one from a farmhouse or a barn in Idaho and put a little cupola up there. Something like at least two of them could be appropriate. And I just want to make sure we're making this decision based on real information and based on what our thoughts were at the time. And again, I support not adding anything to this roof structure. I'm just clarifying how we came to where we are now. That's all.
Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong here, but separate than the 3 elements of Sandy style, a roof this size would require 4 kind of roof forms of some kind, not necessarily a cupola, but it could be a cupola, dormer, or whatever you want to put in it, that code typically requires 4.
That's correct.
Okay. Just a couple, this is kind of where I'm at on this. When I was thinking about this, I was thinking about other buildings as they would be created and what we would ask from a school. I think a school is a really good kind of use case for this because schools, like Sandy, also don't have a ton of money. They have a very specific use for this. They have public interest the same way that the city does in the Parks Department. And I think that they are serving the public in a great way. That being said, what would I require of the school? I think that the code and the intent of the code, even in the parks, is to not have that basic building. And I think what we have, especially, and I'm all for it because of the safety aspect, especially without the stone wrapped pillars. We no longer have any faux wood on there. What we have is we have painted metal and bare concrete, essentially. And I think that it is a standard looking building. It might be a fine standard looking building, but it's a standard looking building. And I think the intent of our code is to not just have metal roofs, painted steel buildings. And so when I'm looking at what I would require somebody else and what the intent of the code is, I don't care if it's a cupola. I don't care if it's a faux painted beam. To me, what I care about is that it has some kind of additional architectural interest to it. Whether that's wood wrapped on the beams to add a little bit more of that timber feel, whether that is finding a cool stone to wrap the cement in that's safe. To me, whether that, or even adding dormers or some other kind of roof form to break up that function, I don't really care what they are personally, but I do think that there needs to be some kind of architectural interest, especially on a building this size. You mentioned it felt so much bigger than a basketball court. That's because it's a huge building.
It's a huge building.
And I think that we ignore the intent of the code when we don't have some form of architectural structure. And I think that regardless of whether it's specific to this building or not, I don't want to look back on this and say that we are just ignoring whatever the intent of that code is. I think that to others' points, I don't think that we need to go full on crazy Sandy style because it is a decent looking building. It is serving a purpose. It doesn't have these giant walls. There's all these other pieces that I think mean that we don't have to go crazy with this, but I do think that it needs some kind of architectural interest, and I'd be open to hearing kind of ideas on what
If
that would be.
wrapping the bases, the big gray metal bases with some kind of either rock or wood was on the agenda tonight, I'd be all for that. I'd say, good idea, let's wrap the base of those things, because they are kind of ugly. They're probably safer for a kid to fall into than,
Yeah, I think the sharpness,
multi-service,
yeah.
they're round and whatever, maybe paint them so they're not gray, maybe a darker yellow to match the yellow beams, I don't know. But that's not, on the agenda tonight. And having been, I should say, one of the architects of Sandy Style when it originated, in fact, I went to a retreat at Timberline Lodge, Ashwana or some weird retreat, and I came home and went around town and took pictures of all of our current city things and went to Tracy Brown and said, we need to come up with a Sandy Style. So, I'm not like, he took it and ran. But, so I am all for Sandy Style. I think it has made our city more cohesive looking and prettier, and then we had Happy Valley steal it from us. But, we were the original wood, beam, structure, metal, whatever.
Happy Valley has one of these, by the way. It's gorgeous.
And they have cupolas on their roof.
They're steel wrapped, or not they're steel, but I believe that they have stone wrapped pillars, and it's got lots of timber, if I remember correctly. It's a gorgeous structure.
Much bigger tax base.
Yes, it probably cost a whole lot more.
It was around $500,000 for Happy Valley structure when we compared prices and bids.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not saying that this structure couldn't be improved, but for what our budget is and what its purpose is, other than doing something with those round base beams, I think that any kind of faux wood painting on that, especially on the upper part, I mean, you can't even see
No,
up there.
and I agree that in the I-beams, the faux wood painting would be.
Yeah, I mean, those
silly
great
knowing
on
what we
Space Age Fuel.
Yeah,
Looks
and I
nice
think
there.
if what we knew was used, I think in a typical process, we would condition something, and then that would be then go get built. This is kind of
Yeah, it's coming after the fact.
kind of a weird way. And so, I'm trying to also not let that skew my judgment as I'm kind of going through.
But as far as the two major modifications that are in front of us tonight, I'm in favor of both of them. I wish I had, if we'd had more, if I'd had at the beginning or the July meeting, I think I might have been in Wisconsin when that one came
Yeah.
about.
I struggle with that still a little bit in that I, condition something and turns out it was built a different way. And so now we're going, oh, that's going to look funny because it's the beams that we used, didn't do it. And kind of, what does that mean? Okay. What if we require any other builder to do something and they build it a different way? Are they going to come back to us and say, hey, you know what? This is going to look funny now that we used a different material?
But we also couldn't require them to build it like the gazebo in the park. I mean, that was a work of art, one-off. And yet they built in the park too.
No, I'm not
And that was
asking.
in Sandy Style.
Yeah, and I don't think
But
me or anybody else here is asking for that.
Yeah.
It's, I think though that to a degree, budget and the fact that it was built first, shouldn't necessarily skew our judgment. And then look at the intent of the code, and kind of what's there. Because I do, if this was the school or if this was another agency, a church, a gym, Mount Hood Athletic Club, or any other place, wanting to do it, that was open to the public.
if it looked just like that, I wouldn't have a problem with it.
See, and I would.
Cedar Ridge used to have an open covered structure. It got eliminated when the city bought them. I mean, I don't know if it went when the city bought the property or
I
if it was
demoed that.
before that. I mean, it went away.
That thing was hideous.
I mean, when my son went to Cedar Ridge, when it was a middle school, that was the place where everybody went out at recess if it was raining.
That thing was built.
We also used to have a really cool slide from the top of that hill down to the field. Metal, so in the summertime, really could be painful. And it was like 5 or 6 feet wide. It was not to code, but it was still fun.
Commissioner O'Leary, I see your hand up.
Yeah, a few things, just so we're all on the same page. a standard basketball court is 94 feet by 50 feet, and I'm going to guess the building was designed around that. I don't know how wide the building is, but the 100 feet checks with a standard basketball court. And of course, it does look huge out there in the open air, but kudos to the designers for actually making a standard size court. In other words, people could have a real game in there regardless of if there's more baskets or not. Just so we all know that that is the size of a basketball court. The second thing is on the faux painting, there's significant discussion around the fact that it's difficult to faux paint wide flange beams. That's actually what those are. I get concerned if that starts getting introduced into the discussion that it introduces a precedent for the future. And I'm going to recommend that if we do let the faux paint go away, that we just say, let the faux paint go away and don't introduce the fact that it's partially due to the wide flange beams, because that could encourage someone in the future to say, oh, if I design it with wide flange beams, I won't have to do the paint. And then I had one more thing. Again, I'm old. Oh, I also get concerned with the discussion around budgets or how much money somebody has versus complying with a code. I think we just interpret the code. I like the fact that it can be interpreted on a case-by-case basis. But again, we don't want people coming and saying, we don't have very much money, so we want to do this or that. That's all.
If I can say something, Chair, I would, on the last point that our lawyer brought up, I would not ever recommend putting that as a finding. Because I do agree with Commissioner O'Leary, that is a very slippery slope.
Not only a finding, but even a point of discussion.
Sorry.
Just to add one thing
Yeah.
too, I think you did a deliberately painted all these different areas, different colors. You got the tan columns, the black gable ends, the green roof. I'm not sure what you're gonna paint the bottom of the posts are.
Can I speak from over here?
Yeah, if you don't mind coming up to the podium and
Yeah, just so the
introducing
mic will
yourself.
pick you up.
It all has to be in the minutes.
Tiana Rendell, Parks and Recreation Director for City of Sandy. The concrete bases have been dyed as specified in the original findings, so they are not actually gray. They are a light off brown color. I don't remember the technical name of the color, but they have been dyed as you requested. This is what dyed concrete looks like.
And we went out of our way not to use sonotubes for the footings.
But I was under the, I don't know, I thought I was under the impression that they were gonna be painted. And I was gonna bring up the point, the reason for that is just the different colors and not doing the faux paint or pattern or whatever. It's just that, and I guess this can be said anywhere, but this is an attractive nuisance. This is an area where kids could come in and do graffiti and tag it in many different ways, dozens of times through the year. Who knows? It happens all the time at parks. And for the parks to be able to be ready just to cover that up, anything that is just a straight color paint is the easiest way to get rid of that instead of trying to manipulate. That's why a lot of even stone is gorgeous, and it could happen to that little picnic area. But again, anything that's an attractive nuisance, the less you're giving kids the opportunity, or an easy way to get rid of that.
Alexa, off.
Okay.
And again, the fact that it has different shades of color, I think, makes it stand out more than other open air structures that I've seen. It looks different. It's not, I think when you look at it, in my opinion, it doesn't call for more elements, more design elements. You look at it and just the different colors of it actually look like the intent, there was a deliberate intent to
to make it attractive. And I think it is attractive, so.
I would say there certainly was deliberate intent, right? As the applicant, and I haven't said who the applicant is, right? Because I'm not trying to say like the city here, but as the city, we want a beautiful park, right? We want to build something that is attractive and that park goers appreciate and people that are driving by the highway appreciate. But we also want it to be functional, and you know, some of the added items that we are talking about this evening don't improve the functionality, or frankly, from staff's perspective, the aesthetic nature of the park. So that's why we're back here before you. I would also just add that the applicant hasn't mentioned cost in our discussion, right? So
That was my fault.
and I am not pointing at you,
I know, but, you know.
Commissioner Malone, at all. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
set the tone that that's not, cost is not why we're back here having this conversation. It's it's
Necessary, unnecessary.
thank you. That's a good way to put it.
While we're sitting here looking at all of these minute details, I think I also have to say that the park is just absolutely fantastic, and everybody involved should be commended, both in the design, the use of the existing land, and the execution. It's just a huge benefit to our whole city.
Commissioner Zwasky, I want to make sure that you have a chance to chime in here if you want as well.
Yeah, so I don't really think that the faux paint adds anything to it. You know, functionally necessary, aesthetically pleasing at a bare minimum, not an eyesore, that it's safe. I think, you know, if you can kind of just check those basic boxes, then things like the faux paint don't really make a difference or move the needle. But I agree with what Art says, that that's a very good use of the land. And when I was growing up, we played a lot of basketball outside. So having someplace dry when it's raining out, that's a big plus.
Yeah, I don't have anything further to add. We probably need to land this plane as sooner than later. I do kind of sympathize with your thoughts on the intent of the code, looking at the special variances. The unique nature of the proposed development is such that the intent and purpose of the regulations of provisions to be waived will not be violated. But I think what we're struggling with is thinking of the intent and then the reasonableness, practicality of applying it to a unique circumstance, situation, structure. And we're struggling with that as to how do we resolve that? And I think we just kind of say we gave it our best shot. We tried to, and we landed here.
It met 3 of the requirements for Sandy style, correct?
Yes, but none of the roof requirements.
Other than the green roof.
That was a Sandy style. It doesn't meet the 4 roof forms. Yeah. That was one of the 3.
Yeah, so that just to remind everybody, before it sounds like you're moving towards the vote, so I just want to remind everybody here. So in July, you approved 2 variances in full, one of which was to reduce the roof pitch, which is still not being contested or discussed, so that's still good. A second one was to remove the required stone base from the building, which you also approved. And then the third variance was to remove the secondary roof form requirement. What was approved in July was kind of what I would consider a partial variance. You had said that it could have 1 or more cupolas. So we never said that, the commission never said that it had to have 4. And actually, they never said that it had to have more than 1. So before you tonight, oh, and then in addition to that, staff had recommended, it was mainly me, I'll just put it out there, had recommended the faux paint. So what's being requested tonight is the removal of the faux paint condition, which had nothing really to do with any of the variances, and complete removal of the partial variance approval is what's being requested. So to remove the requirement for even a cupola. So just so everybody's on the same page with what the request is before you, that is the request in a nutshell right there, those two things.
Also that before we have any motion, we'll need to close the public hearing. But to kind of recap my thoughts on the last meeting, I think with those conditions, I'll go back to kind of my intent for tonight, and which is that I think it was a compromise to find some architectural interest in the building. I think that I'm totally okay with the beams, not really fitting in the paint, that's fine. The cupola not really fitting in after we adjusted it, it's fine, but I would prefer a replacement for those items with another architectural interest piece. Those could disappear because they don't fit in after looking at them, that's fine. But whether that's wrapping beams in wood, whether that's adding something else, that would be my preference.
And any additions would be handled in another meeting.
We
No.
can
We have to
it
do
all.
it tonight.
We
We
can do it all
conditions that we would add tonight. I'm fine with where we're at. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I don't feel the need to pursue other things.
I'd like to kill the idea of any wrapping in wood for a pre-engineered wide flange beam, which is narrower at the bottom and wider at the top. I don't see that being done on any way. In fact, I think that was part of the discussion that led to approving the faux paint.
Yeah,
I'm
I think,
trying to minimize that being discussed in the future. I just see no way that could be done.
I brought it up as an example, and when bringing it up as an example tonight, it would not be for those vertical beams, but for the gable end beams, which do appear to have a consistent
Yeah.
width.
Oh, gotcha. I thought we were talking about the vertical members. Sorry about that.
Nope, that's all right. I wasn't clear. And again, just an example, I'm open to anything, but that's just what's coming immediately to mind.
I don't have any other ideas.
Close the.
Yeah, so it sounds like we're pretty much to the end. So if somebody wants to make a motion to close the public meeting.
If I can make one final comment.
Absolutely.
Sure.
please do.
Commission, before you do that, I just want to reiterate that this project specifically went through several rounds of community engagement and involvement. From a larger scale through the Parks and Trails master plan process, but also site specific or neighborhood specific rather, surveys and engagement, as well as various rounds of review from the city council who sort of bought off on this sort of concept that we've moved forward with and that ultimately has been constructed. And so, for what that's worth, I just think it's important to note that there's been a robust process around this style of building, which graphically or as it was displayed in those staff reports and community engagement opportunities was substantially similar, I think, to what was built.
I'm curious because if I remember, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, but the covered shelter, if I remember correctly, was a late addition to the park. Was it included, the structure and the design included in the community involvement?
There was a public survey mailer that went out to the neighborhood. I think it's 300 houses. I can't remember the specific number, but had a rendering of the basketball shelter. We were looking at basically introducing the idea of the covered structure, what the preference was, uncovered, half court, full court, covered, the whole series of different options. And I believe we included a rendering at that point of the shelter itself.
And was the rendering the same design?
Yeah, the what is out there today.
As a resident, I can confirm that we got that information outside of anything having to do with being on this commission. They did a good job communicating and in fact, I chose to not really engage that much because I got all the information and I liked what they were doing. So we did get the information about the covered structure as community members.
All right, ready to close? If there's a motion,
I move that we close the public hearing. 7:54.
I will second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion approved, 754.
We move to the motion. I will read it then. I move that the major modification to file number 25-037 design review variances final order be approved to rescind the condition to paint the I-beam gable ends with a faux wood pattern due to the required amount of design elements for the basketball court shelter being met, and to approve the variance to section 17.90.120.c.4 to omit the secondary roof form requirement.
I will second that motion.
All right, we have a motion from Commissioner Crosby, a second from Commissioner Malone. Kelly, will you please do a roll call vote?
Sure. Commissioner Crosby,
Yes.
Commissioner Malone,
Yes.
Commissioner Zawowski,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Leary,
Yes.
and Chair Wagoner.
No.
Okay.
All right, motion passes at 7:55. All right, with that, we have moved the end of our agenda. I thank everyone for being here tonight, and I'll turn it over to Chair Malone for our next meeting. Meeting adjourned. 7:56.